Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video my mom is going to be making a beautiful tabletop with resin and real flowers. The first thing she's doing here is mixing in her resin, and in this video she's using craft resin. It's a 1:1 ratio by volume, so she mixes in equal parts of the A and B. This is a great resin to use for tables because it has a very clear and hard finish. I'll have a discount code for craft resin linked in my description, so be sure to check that out if you want to give them a try. But whichever resin you use, make sure to check the instructions so you're mixing the proper ratios. Now she'll be adding in some pigments, and she starts off with just resin's pigment paste in the shade Titanium White. And anytime you're using a pigment paste, you'll always want to make sure to mix it in the container first before adding a small amount into your cup of resin, because while that container is sitting around, the parts of the pigment paste can separate. So she gives it a very good mix and then adds some into her cup of resin. These are our favorite pigment pastes to use, and I'll also have a discount code for them in my description. Next, she'll be adding in just resin's Seafoam Green. Again, she mixes it and then adds some into her resin. She'll be using a table which has a detachable top, and it also has a lip which makes pouring resin into it very convenient. And she starts to pour her pigmented resin onto the tabletop. She uses a silicone makeup brush to spread out the resin. And she'd like for the color to be just a little bit lighter, so again she's taking her Titanium White pigment and adding some more of that into her cup. She mixes that in and then again pours onto the tabletop. And now she's using her silicone makeup brush to blend that together nicely. And now she can start placing in her flowers. It's really important to use dried flowers with your resin. The majority of these flowers have been pressed dried, and a really easy way to do that is to put them inside of a notebook and place something heavy on top and leave them for around 2 weeks. And this will extract all of the moisture that can cause problems within your resin. If you place in fresh flowers in your resin, they'll start to release their moisture and they'll rot over time, and overall will be a pretty big disaster. Another way that you can dry your flowers is by using silica gel, and this is a great way to dry your flowers if you don't want them to be pressed and you'd like for them to keep their shape and their color. And that's how we dried my flowers to preserve my wedding bouquet. If you're interested in that video and that whole process, I'll leave it linked above. She's using a really nice combination of colors, and I love how the yellow pops. She's taking some small pieces and placing them around the outer edge. Depending on the viscosity of resin that you're using, your flowers may move around a bit. In particular, if you're using a low viscosity resin which has a lot of movement, but to solve this problem and to not have to worry about rearranging your flowers, after pouring your resin you can wait a while for it to start thickening, and that will keep your flowers in place. You don't necessarily have to wait too long. Even waiting 10 minutes will make a big difference. However, if you're working with a medium or a high viscosity resin, that extra step won't be necessary. And she's just adding on some final touches. Now that the resin is starting to get tacky, she's using a silicone stick to lightly push down on some areas that are bulging out and pressing them into the resin, and because the resin is more thick now, it can help to keep those flowers from bulging out too much. She allows this layer of resin to harden and comes back the next day. Now that everything is hardened into place, she takes some scissors to help get rid of those areas that are popping out a little bit too much. This is just to help ensure that everything can be nicely covered with resin and we have a perfectly smooth finish. And again, she mixes in her resin. She mixes those two parts together very well, and typically you want to mix for around 3 to 5 minutes. Once her resin is mixed in well, she pours some into a smaller cup. She'll be using the airless bubble remover machine by Resiners, and this is the easiest way to get rid of all of your air bubbles and really ensure for your resin to be crystal clear. This is one of our favorite devices to use, and it's so simple to use as well, and I'll have this linked in my description. All you do is place your cup of resin inside, place on the lid, make sure that it's closed good, and you also need to seal this little area as well. And you just press the button to turn it on. I have a lot of videos using the airless machine and we're really happy with it. We also show footage where you can see the air bubbles rising to the top of the cup, and it's something really cool to see. However, unfortunately, my mom did not film that this time around, but I'll leave a link above to a video that shows that process. After just a couple of minutes, you can remove your cup of resin and it will be completely bubble free. This is especially great to use on projects with flowers where you want to avoid using a torch gun. You can still use a torch gun while working with flowers in your resin. However, you need to be extra careful. If your flowers are bulging out of your resin, you could potentially burn them. And she slowly pours on her second layer. Pouring slowly can also minimize the amount of air bubbles that are created versus pouring fast. She made sure that the resin is covering the whole area and again comes back the next day to add in one more layer. So here she had already mixed in her resin and gets straight to pouring. She uses a small wooden stick to pick out any imperfections such as dust particles or fibers. And for a perfect finish, and since the flowers are completely covered in resin, she'll be going in with a torch gun. And she moves it very quickly not to burn the resin because burnt resin can leave yellow marks. Before she leaves it to harden, she makes sure to cover it with something so that nothing will fly into the resin while it's hardening. And once that last layer has hardened, she can come back and attach the legs. And it's really simple, all you have to do is screw them in place. And here's the final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on my Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art.